Hello and welcome to the very first episode of the Developers Den podcast. My name is Siavash, aka Rainy. Joining me today is Sydney/Fem.
Joining you every day.
Not just today, it's going to be every day.
Every day. Yeah.
We will be the hosts of this brand new podcast. And we will be talking about everything to do with the games industry, just all the latest things that are happening around, but from like a game developer perspective and point of view. And we'll also talk about the journey that we had to take to become a game dev, as well as like little tips and tricks for anybody out there who's either curious about this whole situation, this whole industry, or wants to become a game dev themselves. So hopefully this podcast will be not only entertaining, but also educational.
I think a lot of the stuff out there, the podcasts, the YouTube videos, the whatever, is not all, but a lot of it is from gamers. Whereas there isn't a whole lot of stuff out there that's from us, from developers, from people in the industry. I feel like there's like this weird unspoken rule that like we don't talk about it. And we need to talk about it. Yeah. Like we need to, there's stuff that should be discussed from the insider perspective, if you will. And that's our goal. We want to share all the things. So we want to tell you guys our perspective, things that, you know, maybe we notice things that you guys don't notice, or we see things from a slightly different point of view, or maybe there's things that you guys just don't know about or understand. And so that's the goal, is we want to share everything. All the things.
We have video up, as you can see in here. This is, if you're listening to us from a streaming service that is audio only, so sorry for that. But if you do catch us on something like YouTube, then obviously you're going to be able to see us. But these podcasts will be posted on RainyGames' YouTube channel, so you can catch us there. This is always the awkward thing about the episode 1 of every podcast, is that you still don't know what platforms you're going to be in. Hopefully Spotify, iTunes, you know, those goodies, we might be on there. I don't know. If we are and you're listening to us on those platforms, yay.
Yay. We'll do our best.
But let's get into it. So as I mentioned, we're going to talk about some of our own experiences, as well as latest things in the industry, because I think that would make things really fun and fresh. And instead of us just like sitting down and be like, okay, now business 101, how you do like that. No, this is not a classroom. So just looking at it from a context of a news story, it's just going to work a lot better. Yeah.
And I think also the whole point for this episode kind of needs to be why us? Like, why? Who the heck are we? Point. Why do we have any authority or right to speak about any of this? So I kind of want to give you guys a reason to listen to us, and give you kind of where we came from, how we got here, where we're headed. And I feel kind of too like it's not really the beginning, but I feel like for a lot of people, like this is the beginning. We're about to launch our first game, not like immediately, but very soon. We're getting close. And so this is the calm before the storm, I guess.
Yes, the pilot episode.
Pilot episode.
Yeah. I used to know why they call it the pilot episode. And I was just about to tell everybody that, hey, do you know why they call it the pilot episode? But I forgot. I don't remember why they call it the pilot episode. I think it had something to go. I think it was as simple as like the show taking off the ground, you know, like the first episode. But I could be completely wrong. But anyway.
We need a fact checker hanging out in the background going,
we do.
Actually.
So, the first thing that we thought would be good to like kind of open the very first episode of the podcast was to talk about the journey of Sunnyside. Obviously, I mean, if you know,
what is Sunnyside?
Yeah, that's we're gonna have to look at it from that perspective. Sunnyside is the first game that we are working on right now. If you're listening to this in the future, and the game has come out, and I hope it's good, then yeah, it's our first game. So, and it's what got all of us into the industry. So, we wanted to talk about the journey of it, and not just the game as it stands today, the PC game Sunnyside, but the origin of it, which was a mobile game. Yeah. We wanted to kind of go into detail about it. I did a playthrough with Benny from Merge, and I went through it just a tiny bit, but we never had like the opportunity to actually sit down and go through it and talk about it. So I think this is perfect opportunity.
So, Rainy.
Yes.
How did you come up with Sunnyside?
Oh God, right. So I, if you want to really go back, I was in the uni.
Way back.
Yeah, I was in the uni and I was studying the course for game design. Actually, the proper term for it was computer games.
Oh God.
It wasn't great. It was really not a great course. Not gonna say what uni or anything like that.
Well, for the Americans out there, uni means college and or university. Just saying. Just helping out the non-Brits.
That's useful. Yes. And I was 21 when I went to this university.
So young.
Course. Yeah. So anyway, yeah, it was called computer games. Not very great course. It had a lot more to do with computer programming in terms of making a software, rather than anything to do with games. We had a module or two modules that was specifically about game design. And we had a fantastic tutor. He's actually quite famous. And he did teach me everything that I use today. But other than that, one module, nothing else was useful.
That's unfortunate.
So I was like, to hell with this. I'm going to learn Unreal on the side, because I just learned about this amazing thing called blueprints. The last time I used Unreal Engine was Unreal Engine 3. So it was C++ and stuff. So I didn't know Unreal Engine 4 had this thing called blueprints. And for those of you out there who don't know what blueprints or any of that means, it's essentially what we call a visual scripting program language. And instead of the traditional way of programming, where you sit behind a black screen with a bunch of text on it and you just type out, you connect things that literally look like wires, like electrical wires, and that's how you connect up the game's logic. And that's
I'm just going to hop in
scripting.
Though, because just as an aside comment, as somebody who's never been computer technologically savvy, I play video games. That's about as far as I got. I always thought that the like Matrix black screen with the scrolling, like I always thought that was kind of a joke. Like I didn't actually think that's how this stuff was done until my partner is a software engineer. And so I'll go look at him working and it's literally a black screen and just white text. And I'm just like, how do you...
Yeah.
I cannot fathom how anybody can look at that and understand what all of that is. And so Blueprints offers a really incredible opportunity for people like me who would never bother learning. Essentially, it's another language or 2 or 10 or 12 like Kevin knows. He knows like freaking every software language there is. But Blueprints gives you the ability, like Rainey said, to see it. You don't have to read it. You can see it. And it's kind of like, I'm trying to think of a good analogy of like, it's like reading a novel versus like picture books.
Yeah. I mean, I guess it's a good way. Yeah.
But that makes it seem like it's for like children. And it's
easier for a child to comprehend it, I guess. Yeah.
You still have to understand the logic behind programming, which is why I still don't touch the back end of the game. But yeah, I think it's an incredible tool that Unreal has put out that lets people like you, like us, like our team, like Laura on our team, to go from I want to do this to I actually can do it. And not have to have all that space in between of learning a whole nother language. And
Unreal isn't the first to do this. There are some other kind of game engines that do this. Actually, the game engine I used before Unreal It's called Construct, which some people
Oh.
won't even consider much of a game engine because it's like very small. But that is
Kevin was
also
telling
very
me-
visual.
Kevin was telling me the other
Scripting.
day about Godot, but
Oh,
I
Godot
don't
is
think
pretty
that one.
good.
Does Godot have visual too?
I don't know, but I know you can do C# with it. And I know people do C# with it, but I don't know if he has visual scripting. But it's a very good engine. It's a very small open source engine. But I feel like recently we had almost like a game engine boom. That
for sure.
Just the tools have just become so
Yeah,
incredibly available. I think especially post-COVID, these tools became so available. Because like Unreal wasn't free as is now. Essentially the deal, by the way, and I don't know if they changed it or not. This is my information from 2 years ago.
We did just look this up the other day because I was curious. I think I know where you're going with this with the royalty payments.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's
So you don't need to pay Unreal. Epic, sorry. Anything,
yeah.
unless something happens.
Yeah, so the way that Epic has it set up is that you can use Unreal Engine for free. They even have a whole marketplace where you can get free assets. You can learn how to operate and stuff within Unreal. And then you can release the game too, and they're fine with it up to the point of the game earning $1 million. Once it earns $1 million, I think it's $1 million. From what we saw, it was $1 million.
Oh, it's 25,000
so once it pulls in $1 million, then you start having to pay them royalties for using the engine, which is actually, it's only 5%. It was actually a lot less than I was expecting it to be. So
Yeah,
even
Steam would take more than that.
Isn't that bad? Yeah, Steam takes 30. So anyway, it's a whole other conversation. So
Yeah.
so you found out about blueprints. Yeah, you found out about visual
amazing.
scripting.
In
And then
Unreal,
what?
because like I was using Construct and I tried making a few games with Construct, but I never got that far because my ideas never can contain them. They always become way too big. And Unreal was like the first engine that I had actually played games that I loved that were developed in Unreal. So for me to be able to sit down in the university's library and instead of doing my assignments, work in Unreal and make a game in the same engine that something like Batman Arkham Asylum was made in, and I loved that game. It was incredible that I could just make a game. So I started learning it, and on the side, and I worked on this horror game called Rehabilitation. Lauren came up with the name, as she does.
And who's Lauren?
She also came up with the name for Sunnyside.
Wait, who's Lauren?
Yeah, she's my partner.
There you go.
She's behind me right now playing Yakuza, like a Dragon Asian. Technically, that's the name of it.
Yeah.
Which you should play if you don't. So started working this horror game, and it wasn't really supposed to go anywhere. I always thought it would be best to learn something through making something with it. So I was like, I want to make something and then learn the engine through it. So it was a great opportunity. In the game, I think the files are all lost now because it was on my old laptop. But it was a weird little horror game for me. Little side note, we had an assignment, which was for something called the Welcome Week, which was the first week in our second year, which they did essentially give everybody a challenge. They said you have to make a card game using anything, any programming language you like, and then submit that to us, and then the best one wins. I don't remember if I won or not, but I used Unreal, and I still have the footage. I still have the footage from it. It looks incredible. Nobody
I love that you
did.
don't remember if you won or not.
I think I did. But nobody's game looked as good as mine because I used Unreal Engine and everybody else just used basic C++ without any other engine. Because that didn't care about it. I cared about the visuals. Nobody else did. I actually designed UI and everything. And I found a video recently.
Origin story.
We might put it up on the screen for people who are watching it through video, just so you can see. When I watched that video like a week ago and I found it again, I felt so betrayed by my uni that they didn't actually compliment me even a tiny bit about it. There was like this one guy that came and looked at it and was like, oh, this is very different than everybody else's. Cool. And then he kind of left.
I want to see this. I haven't seen this yet.
If I'm in the university and I'm trying to learn this, I felt betrayed by the educational system that they just didn't help me kind of pursue it. And that's why I was like, I'm done with uni. So anyway, let's fast forward to COVID. So I had a job in the uni, and this is actually going to be important in the story. I had a job in the uni. I was working in the student union, and I was a marketing designer, and then I got promoted to lead marketing designer, and I would just make
fancy.
Yeah, I would make posters and videos for the billboards and stuff, and I also maintained their website because they realized I can do web design. So that was my job, but COVID hit, and we were just at home, couldn't even go to uni, nothing, and then I got an email telling me that because it's COVID and you can't come to uni, and you're just a student, we have to let you go from your job. We can't actually let you, what was it called, furlough payment, I think at the time.
Yeah,
we can't do that. So that was my job over, and obviously my parents from Iran, which is where I'm from, if you didn't know. I know, surprise, shocker. They, as you would expect, they would be financially supporting me. But they couldn't, because our currency in Iran compared to or converted to the British pound is nothing. It's just next to absolutely nothing. So they couldn't even support me with any money. So I was stuck without any money, without a job, nothing. So I was just at home behind my computer, and I would work in Unreal from time to time just to feel accomplished instead of just playing video games all day.
I relate to that.
And there was one cool game that came out recently, Animal Crossing, New Horizons, during COVID. So Lauren, again, my partner, she absolutely grew up with the game and loves the game and stuff. And I played the game before too. I love it too. So we both got the game and started playing it. And I grew up playing Harvest Moon. So watching Animal Crossing and thinking about Harvest Moon and working in Unreal, I kept thinking of, what if I make my own farming game? Because I was like, this is the best opportunity. I could just... a farming game is simple enough that I can just put it together quite easily. That changed quite considerably. It's easy.
Farming
It's
game,
small.
actually the hardest freaking game to make.
I mean, how big could it get? So
how big could it possibly be?
So that's where Sunnyside came from. Essentially, originally, the idea was that Sunnyside was a mobile game that was supposed to imitate Animal Crossing in the way that whenever you would open the game, the time in the game would be the exact time as it is in real world for you, for your time zone. And then you need to check on it throughout the day. So if you wake up in the morning and check your plants and stuff, you can water them. And then by night, you can go water them again. And next day, they might be grown. So you couldn't even sleep and stuff. It was real time.
A la Farmville, Facebook.
Yeah, pretty much. Actually, that was it. I was like, Lauren played that game too. And I looked at it. I was like,
I did too.
Somebody could do better than this. Come on.
Yeah.
So
to be honest, though, I will admit, Farmville's actually a pretty decent game. The only problem I have with it is the obvious integration of please spend your money on us. That once you remove that, it's actually a pretty decent game. But as we'll probably talk about either in this episode or future episodes, monetization and how it impacts video games. But anyway, so you came up with Sunnyside. You were going to make it into a mobile game. You started making it into a mobile game.
Yes, we started making a mobile game for Android at the time because I had an Android phone at the time. And I still have an APK of one of the versions of Sunnyside Mobile that you could install on your phone. And it would keep the time to real time, and then you could plant stuff. It looked quite cute. I downloaded a bunch of characters from Marketplace. There was like this chibi character set that actually... the animals for our trailer, for our Kickstarter page, was from that pack as well. You
mean the animals that show up as the animals in almost every single farm sim Kickstarter?
They do. They are. You know why? Because they're very classic Harvest Moon.
Yeah, and they're good placeholders.
And they're pretty good. So I used that pack, and it was a fun little mobile game. So at this time, and I think I got the timeline a bit incorrect. I think now that I think about it, the Sunnyside Mobile happened before COVID. Yes.
Yeah, I remember you saying that you had already been working on it.
Yes, that's
and
correct.
That's when you lost your job.
Let me correct this. I did make Sunnyside Mobile before COVID happened. So it was maybe 2019 even at the time, or maybe it was the start of 2020, 2019, 2020, early. That's when I did Sunnyside Mobile because, and the reason I remember it is because one of my coworkers in the uni, we both did the same job pretty much. I was the lead designer. He worked under me for the website stuff. And he was also interested in Unreal Engine, but he had a bit more C++ knowledge. And his name was Lawrence, and still in contact with him, bless him. And bless him. And then the idea was that he would help with the online infrastructure so that people could trade with each other, kind of like Farmville. You know, you could have a shop in there and people could come by and stuff. And then we even had an idea for a farmers union that you could, you know, make, and people could join it. And then you could share resources between each other. It was a bad idea. Wasn't a bad idea. Yeah. and so the two of us were like, okay, what if we do a Kickstarter? So the Kickstarter is still up because you can't delete Kickstarter pages at all. So if you search Sunnyside, it still is going to show up at the very bottom of it. But we made a Sunnyside Mobile Kickstarter for £5,000, which is, I mean, really nothing when it comes to game dev. Just absolutely nothing.
A month for two people.
Yeah, maybe. So we did that. We got maybe £55. Actually, if you pull it up,
your moms.
we'll put it up on the podcast on the screen as well. Yeah, it was like a few friends and family, and then some random. There are these random companies that come and give you money during your Kickstarter, and then message you and like, hey, we can promote your Kickstarter. Come tell us. So where was it?
But anyway, so you fail your Kickstarter. Okay.
Yes, we failed the Kickstarter, and then this is
we could take 3 hours to go through the full journey, and we don't have that much time. But so you first Kickstarter's a failure. COVID happened, lost your job, and then decided to do another Kickstarter at that point. But at that point, you decided to change it into a PC game.
I had a lot of time, right? So I would open Unreal and then I would just work on Sunnyside. And then one day I was actually upgrading from 4.19 or something like that to 4.25 because it's been a long time since I updated the engine. And I didn't select the mobile version in the upgrade. So it just automatically turned the game into a desktop version. So I launched it and I was like, oh, okay, this looks...
My mistake.
Kind of, yeah. It's like, this looks so much better than the mobile version. So I did a survey. I think if you go far back...
We still have it.
In the Sunnyside server, you can still find it. And I surveyed people, hey, should we do a mobile game or should we do a PC game? And yeah, and then at that point, it became a PC game. And then pretty much after that, it's pretty much routine. I started posting about it on like social media, Twitter, Reddit, stuff like that. Reddit mostly. And then the game, one of the posts I put on Reddit kind of did pretty well. I got like 800, 900 upvotes or something. And we got a lot of people joining the Discord. I think we got like 200-300 people joining Discord at that time, which was crazy because we were sitting at 60 people for like 6 months.
Yeah.
And that was a nice boost.
5,000.
We're at 5,200, I think.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
It got crazy recently. But so you did the Kickstarter. Kickstarter was successful. And I'm actually going to hop in here because that's where I joined the party. So, you know, Rainy's had this goal kind of to be a game developer for a really long time. You kind of started when you were a kid playing video games, wanting to be a game designer, all that stuff. I wanted to be a pastry chef.
That's true.
And so, my journey's been a little bit weirder, I think.
Your journey, I'd say the start of it was the most random it could ever be. Because
I
you
mean,
didn't just message me, did you?
No, I didn't actually. So
people need to know about the message. The message.
So my I'm a little bit older than Rainy, and I grew up in Southern California, and I'm one of those people who I've always been jealous of people like you who kind of know what you want to do and have an idea and you chase it. Kevin's the same way. He knew when he was 12 he wanted to be a computer programmer, and that's just, he did it. He had a little deviation here and there, but he kind of always had that trajectory of what he wanted to do. I have not been as fortunate in that I want to do everything and I want to try everything once. I'm more the jack of all trades, master of none type person. I want to be good at everything. And so, you know, I spent a period of time in high school. I wanted to be a teacher. I wanted to be a police officer. I wanted to be an FBI agent. I wanted to go in the FBI for a while. Actually, fun story about that. I actually was really into John Douglas, who is the FBI agent who developed the whole profiling technique for profiling serial killers. And I read a lot of his books, and I wanted to be a profiler, and I was really interested in it. And I actually wrote him a letter.
You did?
Saying like, hey, I'm interested in I was probably 15. Just, hey, I'm interested in your work. I'd like to do this. Like, do you have any advice? What trajectory I should take to get into Quantico and whatever. And he actually replied, and I don't have the letter anymore, but yeah, so I was pretty serious about it.
We need to know.
Just, kindness, good luck. It's
if only
whatever.
He knew now.
Yeah, right. So there was a period of time I was convinced that I was going to be a movie producer. And that was what I was set on for a good period of time. And a lot of people in my life laughed at me and said, you have to have a ton of money. Like, there's no way you can get into that. It's so hard to break into.
I tried pursuing that once as well. It is
Look
very
at me
expensive.
now.
Yeah.
Because I knew that I had the skills for it. So anyway, there were a lot of things that I wanted to try. And by the time I graduated high school and got to college, I originally went to college to become a teacher. That was my original path. And I was taking all the classes and stuff. And my partner at the time wasn't as supportive of the idea of me being a teacher. And convinced me that it wasn't a good job and I shouldn't do it. He didn't know that he was actually right. Because teaching in America recently has been a rough gig. But so I dropped out of those classes and I started taking other things, trying to find, like, what am I going to do? I thought maybe I'll, study history. And I was like, what do you do with a history degree? And then I was like, maybe I'll get an English degree. And I was like, well, what do you do with an English degree? I love history. I love history.
No,
how can you not?
So do I, but like wanting to follow it as a career.
I mean, I was trying everything at that point.
That's fair.
The only thing I knew is that science and math are not for me. But when everything is saying STEM is the way to go,
that is just math.
And then now I'm in a crazy. But when everybody's telling you STEM is how you get money, STEM is the way. But I knew that wasn't for me, and I didn't want to get a generic business degree. Got one later. I didn't want to get a communications degree. Just nothing felt right. So I ended up taking a bunch of really random classes to just maybe something would strike my fancy, and ended up taking a baking class at night. And I'd always liked baking. I was always interested in it. I started when I was like 8, trying new things and whatever. And my first few jobs were actually in the culinary industry, so I already had some experience. So I took this random baking class at night, went through the whole semester, had a blast. It was so much fun. And the last night after our final, I'm on my way out. I'm cleaning up all my stuff. I had a lot of stuff, so I was like the last person out the door. And the dean of the culinary school.
What's the dean?
The dean is like the person who runs the program.
What's it called?
And so, I don't know.
Crazy
America.
name.
But so with my college, it was an accredited community college that also had a baking program. So it wasn't like culinary school, like Cordon Bleu or Art Institute or anything like that. It was a a college accredited, but they also had these courses that you could get, a science degree in baking or in cooking. And so I'm on my way out the door, and the dean, her name was Lisa Clark. She kind of stopped me and was like, "Hey, I've never seen you before." And I was like, "Oh yeah, I'm just taking like a night class, whatever." And she goes, "Well, we just instituted a baking and pastry course. It was brand new. They primarily had only been hotel, restaurant, and culinary before that. And now they were implementing a baking pastry program." She said, "If you're interested, I've got information." She handed me the little packet and stuff. And I thought, okay, I had fun. This is interesting. I never really thought I'd be a baker, but why not? So in order to even take the class, I had to buy the chef whites and the aprons and the hats and all the stuff just to take the one class. So I was like, well, I already have all the stuff and I can finish in 2 years. Sure, why not? So the next semester, I just kind of went all in and took all the classes, took, sanitation and safety, and took the cooking classes, and took other classes in there that I didn't need for the degree, but I thought were interesting and might help me. So I took some restaurant management classes. I took hospitality law. I took one of the hotel classes. I kind of just dabbled in everything, see what, learn. And then I got my Associates of Science in Baking and Pastry Arts in 2012. And then I was like, got my college degree. I'm good.
Yeah, you've done.
I'm done. Got a degree or got a job in the field. And that's a whole other, I'm not even going to go into that. But through this whole period of time living in Southern California, I've always liked volunteering for stuff. So while I was going to school and after, I did a whole bunch of stuff. I worked for, the first thing I did was I worked at the Renaissance Fair in Southern California. And then I ended up by happenstance working for Comic-Con International in San Diego. Did that for like 5 years. And then I also, what else did I do? I ended up working for the Hollywood Christmas Parade in Hollywood as like the concert IC.
You worked in Disney, didn't you?
I worked at Disneyland for a couple years on and off. I worked for the city that I lived in like facility operations. I also worked for a day camp. I was a soccer coach. So I've tried.
So how did this journey end up in Sunnyside?
So the pandemic, actually, I was bored.
Yeah.
And so I had tried a whole bunch of stuff. I ended up moving to Texas, which is where I'm at now. And I got to a point where I was sick of culinary, didn't want to do it anymore. And I was looking for literally anything else. It's a hard career. It's a hard career path. And I didn't want to do it. And so I moved here in 2014, and had literally spent that entire time looking for something different because I didn't want to do it anymore. But it still paid the bills. So it was kind of hard to like have 1 foot in and 1 foot out. Tried security jobs for a little while, tried a whole bunch of stuff. And one of the things that I tried was working as a pet food rep at pet stores, which was fun. It was like culinary adjacent. So I was like kind of on my way out.
When you joined Sunnyside, you still had that job.
Technically, yeah. But when COVID happened, we got furloughed. And so I couldn't go to work. And so
I wonder how many career shifts happened because of COVID.
Tons. Yeah. So many people shifted.
Because people were at home and they had the money still coming in. So they had time to sit down and think properly about stuff. Try
new stuff, reevaluate their lives, which is honestly what happened to me. I was sitting on my couch and doing nothing and still kind of getting paid by the government and stuff and trying to figure out what the hell I was going to do after COVID because I didn't want to keep selling pet food. It sucked. And so I was watching a lot of anime and
how did you
playing
find
video
Sunnyside
games
on Kickstarter?
That's actually weirdly part of the story. No, I found it because of my time at Porsche. So because I was so bored, I got a Humble Bundle subscription. Through Humble Bundle, I got My Time at Portia, played it, loved it. Played Valheim, loved the farming. That was my first farming game, was My Time at Portia, which I played Farmville. So if you want to count that. Doesn't count. And then Valheim, I loved the farming part of Valheim. It was like my favorite thing. And so it was My Time at Portia, and then My Time at Sandrock came out, or the Kickstarter. And in the My Time at Sandrock Discord server, somebody mentioned Sunnyside. And that's also how I found Coral Island. And so I backed both of them at the same time. But in that period, playing My Time at Portia and Valheim and all that stuff, I decided I was going to go back to school. And that was kind of really the thing that I think set me up the best for joining you, was because going back to school, I learned new skills that ended up setting me up for doing what I do now. And I was literally sitting on the couch watching something, and an ad came up for online college, and I went, those are always a scam. Let me just look it up. And so I looked it up, and I was like, oh, this actually looks legit.
Yeah,
and so
they're not too bad, actually.
Yeah, I put in a thing to get more information, and I sent it, and literally 5 minutes later, I get a phone call from the recruiter it's actually Purdue University, had just purchased an online schooling thing, rebranded it Purdue Global, and I went back to school on a whim, which was crazy. And then I got my degree in industrial and organizational psychology. And I was just about finishing it up when I joined Sunnyside.
Yeah.
And so, so I found the Kickstarter through that.
And
back to you, Coral Island.
Yeah, just a little quick alleyway from this conversation. The reason Sunnyside's Kickstarter was successful, and I always say this, is besides the Kickstarter campaign itself, which at best was not very good. I mean, it looked pretty for sure, but it didn't have all the correct things that a good Kickstarter campaign need to have, such as good rewards. So we didn't have anything physical besides like the art book and stuff like that. We didn't have plushies. So the only reason it worked was because of all the other farming games that had Kickstarters active at the same time. So huge shout out to Overmagica for the little cross promotion that we did. That was huge. And Coral Island was happening at the same time. We didn't do a cross promotion together. Sandrock, same.
Yep.
But just because they existed, it did generate a lot of search and interest in this whole genre. And Sunnyside was just there as well. So
it was literally it was in the My Time at Sandrock server, and I think I found Coral Island because of them. And then I think it was in Coral Island where I found you, if I remember right. And so, and I joke about this all the time. I actually backed Coral Island at a higher tier.
You did.
Than I backed Sunnyside.
Well, they had better rewards, definitely, as well. And the game looked so much more polished.
It was the statue. I wanted that statue. Yeah. But the reason I backed Sunnyside was that video that you put all that time into. The trailer was so good. And
thank God.
It wasn't even... I don't even think it was the game that I bought into. I think it was... I could feel the ideas and the passion and how badly you want. So it wasn't really Sunnyside I bought into. I think it was you that I bought into. And I was like, this guy he might not really know what he's doing, but I got the feeling that you cared. And that I feel like is sometimes more important.
Yeah. So
I joined the Discord server and in terms of me reaching out, I again was bored, and I needed things to do.
I feel like if I go far back in our chat, I could still find a message.
Oh yeah, you just have to search my name. But yeah, I had been playing Valheim, And my favorite thing is always the cooking aspects and the farming aspects, because food, everything comes back to, I like food, obviously. And so I messaged you, I messaged Valheim, I messaged Coral Island, and I messaged Sandrock. I messaged all of them saying, hey, I was a chef. I have all this training in R&D and recipe development and menu design and cooking. And I'm interested in international and cultures and stuff like that. And if you need an advisor, or if you're looking for anything like that, I'm here, let me help. And Valheim ignored me. And everybody else was like, yeah, that sounds good, but like, we're not there yet in terms of development. So like maybe later. And you were the only one who was like, that sounds awesome. Please join the team. And I was like, okay, cool.
Yeah. At the time, I also didn't have any idea of what you could even do, but I thought it was a good opportunity. And I was also just so excited that somebody was so excited besides myself in the project that wanted to join like this. I mean, what's that saying? You miss all the shots you don't take, or something like that. That was pretty much it. So, I mean, if anybody else messaged me at that time and, wanted to offer help such as yours, I would have said yes.
Which is funny because that's how we end up with most of our team.
Yeah. Yeah.
Was them messaging
you get
us
so
and saying,
much help by just saying yes and pursuing a conversation rather than just saying no and shutting things down.
Now, I want to be clear. We didn't say yes to everybody.
Yeah.
We did vet people a little bit, but yeah, so that's just, that's kind of the 45-minute explanation of kind of our backstories and how we got to this point. And that was 2020, if I remember right.
Yeah. It was, right? It's been it was the January.
2021.
Wait, January of 2021.
Yeah.
Was it January 2021? Yeah. I think it was January 2021.
And then I reached out to you, I want to say in like February, maybe March. I think it was after the Kickstarter was over. And I think I like officially joined in like March, April, if I remember right.
Yeah.
And at that point you had already had three other people. I had
Alan and Cowrie.
And Matt. Don't forget Matt.
Matt's been the OG. He was the first one to join.
Yeah. And another person who did help you, who I'm not going to ignore, which was Austin, who it just didn't work out. He had another job and was too busy, and we were ramping up pretty quickly and just didn't work out, unfortunately. But he did get you a little bit further, which was good. And then so initially I joined in that advisor capacity, and then I just kind of slowly started to realize that you needed way more help.
Oh God. It's just that realization that sets in, that wow, this is not gonna work. This ship is sinking rapidly.
And I feel like that's kind of the important thing that I want to talk about throughout this whole podcast is ideas for games is literally the easiest part. Having good ideas.
Don't want to be the idea guy.
Yeah, being the idea person is easy. The hard part is actioning that and making it happen. And by that I don't mean just sitting down and doing it. I mean planning it, budgeting it, marketing it, making sure you have the team to build it, making sure you have the time to build it.
Yeah, because you can have an idea that just sounds great on paper, but then when you put it into the context of a game, it just doesn't work, because you're like, oh, what if the player does this, or what if the player does that? Oh, it's just super cool. Exploitable. Oh no, it's just not gonna work. So
and then you realize, I mean, a great example using Sunnyside is the item degradation system we were gonna do.
Oh God, yeah, it was great on paper, but oh my God,
great on paper, sounds great, and then you realize, oh, this is why nobody's done this.
The implementation is much more difficult, and I'm sure you can do it, but I mean, you have to keep track of whenever you got something, and then the expiry dates of items, and then at that point you can't stack items that have different expiry dates, because then that won't work.
Inventory management becomes a problem. You also have to look at item count. You have to look at just and every single thing in this journey of making this game, we've had to make so many decisions on just a daily basis. And it always comes down to, is it worth the time and money that it's going to take to do this? Yes, there is this thing we could do that would have been really cool. But is that end product going to be beneficial enough to the player? Are they going to notice it? And if so, or even if not so, is that end product worth how much effort and time and planning and money and all that you have to put into it? So if you're putting in 100 hours worth of work for something that they aren't even really going to notice or care about, or even worse, might actually be a detriment to the gameplay and how much fun it is, do you want to spend the time to do that? No.
Yeah.
So,
and with the list of things that we had added to the game keep piling up, I'm so glad we got rid of it, because that would have been one other stressful mechanic that would add to everything else that you have to do. Imagine like you wake up in a day in Sunnyside, and then your plan for that day is to cook that item that is going bad. But wait, you can't. You get a cutscene at the start, and then by the time you come back home, it's expired, and it's just painful. So I'm so glad we got rid of that system. It just didn't work in the context of Sunnyside at all.
And that's kind of the thing that I feel like, again, more things that we want to talk about throughout the whole journey of this podcast is things that we've learned going from gamers to game makers, from gamers to game developers, to game planners, to game, whatever, theorize, I don't even know the word, but designers, is that there are things that you think as a gamer, as a fan of games, do you think, why don't they just do it this way?
Yeah.
Why don't they just, and then you get to the developer side and you go, oh, that's why. That's why they don't just do whatever the thing is.
I mean, there's a very interesting thing that you can check in a very, very good AAA game. I played it, loved it. Ghost of Tsushima. If you're on a horse and you ride through the bamboos, or if you're just on foot as well, you notice that the bamboos don't have collision. If you're in a bamboo forest, you don't hit any of the bamboos. You just go through them. And, at first you might think, why the hell is that the case? That's just so broken. But imagine for a second if those bamboos had collision, you would just not be able to ride anywhere. So just the fact that it's disabled. And it's the same with some other games that have flying or just cars and stuff. And then there's a dense forest and some items just don't have collision in them. Like in a lot of games that have flying, you notice that trees just have the cylinder in the middle and none of the other stuff has collision, because if all of the leaves and stuff had collision, that would just not work. So,
but even like other things,
so many considerations that go through it.
I know that in the beginning, we had a lot of people asking, is there going to be paragliding? Is there going to be flying? Are you going to have the ability to do this? And it's kind of, and as the developers, we have to stop and go, I don't know. Is that something we want to do? Do we want to consider it? And if we do take the time to consider it, then we have to take the time to consider it. And what does that mean for the game? It's not as simple as, we'll just add this mechanic. You have to look at, well, did they already have access to high areas of the map? And if they did, what can they see from that high area? Do we have to now build up the sides of the map so they can't see certain things? And then are there areas that would be fun to glide from and to? Is it a mechanic? And then you have to, and then it's not as simple as just, we'll just toss it in. Well, now we have to teach you how to do it. We have to design all the items. We have to design the mechanic. We have to explain it through the lore. Why the heck are you able to do this? How do you learn it? Where does it come up in the story? Why are you doing it? So it's not as simple as, let's just add something. And I feel like that happens a lot, especially in a situation like ours, where we have a Discord and we talk to our community. We try to be transparent and we say, hey, suggest stuff. But then we say, oh, no, we're not going to do that. But I can't explain every single decision we make. It's going to take too long. So it's like, we get all these ideas and we have to vet all of them. for how they work.
And that's where a lot of, I feel like, games that kind of die before they can come out, or before the idea is even put into a build, is because of all of this. And I mean, we're pretty much explaining feature creep at this point.
100%.
Is pretty much the core of it, is that you think of an idea that sounds really great on paper and it looks very small as well. But then when it comes implementation, you realize how much larger it is and how much more work needs to go into it, and how many more things in the game will be affected by it. And also it will restrict you in the future when you're adding something else to the game. Now you need to consider that previous thing if it was really small.
And I think the best example of this is the way that the relationship system in Sunnyside was developed. In that all of it comes from and I've said this before, but I'm going to say it again. All of this comes from that one initial idea you had, that you wanted a gay male Persian character. Which on paper, sure, easy. But there's so many other things that we had to consider just to make that one thing work. We had to implement sexuality. We had to implement gender mechanics. We had to implement how a romance system is going to work, how it's going to be different, how it's going to be better.
We always give explanations that of why characters have locked sexualities, but we never mention Parsa, because he was the origin for the system.
I've mentioned a few times that I think only in this kind of an environment. But yeah, it was literally just Parsa was the reason. And what I don't think we ever really have gone into is why you wanted that. And why it was something that we were willing to put all this work into, to have that one thing where we could have just said, screw it, let's take the easy route. Everybody's player sexual and just call it a day. Yeah. In which case we wouldn't have had to deal with any of that stuff. But is the effort worth the reward?
Yeah.
Really?
The reason I wanted Parsa to be who he is because, I mean, first of all, there is really, besides Prince of Persia and maybe one other example, which is a side character in the Walking Dead games, I haven't seen any Persian character in any game. We are the Middle Eastern country that is most often forgotten about. So that when you have Middle Eastern characters, they're from the Arabic countries, or they might be from the Asian side of Turkey, maybe. But Iran is most often forgotten about, because Turkey has a side that is in Asia and not in Europe, and it's Islamic.
I've never heard that before.
Yeah, Turkey, half of it is in Asia, half of it is in Europe. And confusing. So I wanted to add a Persian character, but because of my own beliefs, I wanted to give the spotlight to a group of people that is often never talked about. The country doesn't want them to exist. A lot of people don't want them to exist, but they still exist. And I wanted to say that these people exist. And it's the LGBT community in Iran. So, and I've heard a lot about them. I've read a lot about them. It's horrible stuff. But I wanted to say that these people exist. And so that's pretty much the reason. I wanted to have give spotlight to a character from a group that is often never really talked about or forgotten about. So having an LGBT character that was Iranian was really important to me.
Yeah. And I kind of decided that was a good enough reason to that the ends justify the means, in terms of, okay, yeah, we can put in all this time, this effort, and this hard work if we're going to get this one thing that is important. And it kind of became really the mantra for the whole game. Yep. Was, let's talk about people who don't get talked about. So for all of the character, now we're kind of going into character design for Sunnyside, but in all of the character design, it was, okay, we want to have this type of character. Cool. How do we do it in a way that hasn't been done before, that can showcase somebody who never really gets talked about? And how do we do it in a way that's respectful, that's kind, that's not a word that I try to avoid at all costs, which is pandering, because I don't want to do that ever.
A lot of games recently have been falling into that trap, which we can talk about in detail.
Which is actually a nice segue into what we wanted to talk about. But so it was like, okay, how do we have this game that we wanted to take place in Japan, which I still want to shoot you for that decision. But, you know, how do we make it work in a way that makes sense, that isn't offensive? How do we justify having a diverse cast? Because we want a diverse cast. We want to showcase everybody. How do we justify doing that in Japan? And then, you know, so now it's backstories, and how do we get these people over here? How do we explain why we have, you know, like 3 male black characters, which seems super random when you're finding the game for the first time, and make it not seem like we're just pandering. Yeah. You know, how do we...
For the game being in Japan and with that.
Exactly, yeah. How do we also still make sure we have enough Japanese characters? How do we... And the answer to all of this is we ended up with a huge cast of like 35 characters. But I mean, because that was important to us, was we wanted to have some overweight characters. We wanted to have some members of the LGBTQIA community. We wanted to have, you know, people. We wanted to have older people that you could date. That was a huge thing for me.
That was the thing you brought on to, because I would have never thought of it. Yeah,
because I'm in my 30s, and actually, a lot of our
what's interesting
community is me.
I'm just gonna say, you can always tell when like a game story, well, maybe not always, but most of the time, you can tell when a game's narrative team is all male, because all the female characters are very young. And I
bring this up a lot.
Yeah.
In meetings when we play games together, the whole team, I will often look at something and go, this was written by men. You could just tell.
Yeah.
And that's actually another thing that we want to talk about. So let's just kind of segue into the thing that we want to talk about. So what we want to do for all of our podcasts is kind of talk about the game development, talk about Sunnyside, talk about RainyGames, talk about the business side of things. We also kind of want to talk about news a little bit, kind of how does our experience reflect on our opinions of the industry? Maybe compare opinions we might have had as gamers to opinions we now have as game makers. Compare our opinions now as game developers to other gamers or other news people or podcasters or video makers or whatever. So
how about
I think
huge
let's
ratio?
segue.
How about a huge ratio between Forspoken and HiFi Rush? A game that was marketed to hell before release, and then a silent drop, which is now overwhelmingly positive on Steam. And got
I
a 9
do
out
want
of
to
10.
say, just to be clear, both of them are AAA games.
Yes. Oh yeah, a lot of people think HiFi Rush is indie. That is absolutely not the case.
It's definitely not. No. And you can tell by looking at it that's not an indie game.
Yeah.
But so I do want to be clear. First and foremost, they are both AAA. The difference is marketing approaches.
Both published by huge companies, Bethesda versus Square Enix.
Yep, both huge behemoths in the industry. But the primary difference is how they were marketed, and then just the games themselves. And we kind of want to talk about why we think one did better than the other.
The importance of the game being good versus a good marketing campaign.
100%. I think that is the answer for this particular thing, is that I think we're just in a weird point in time because of influencers, because of social media, because of a whole bunch of other things, that traditional marketing just doesn't quite do what it used to do. I think we learned that first and foremost from CD Projekt Red, from Cyberpunk.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's just kind of becoming more and more obvious because of games like Valheim, because of games like Among Us, because of games like...
Among Us was a very good example. Did you guys know Among Us came out a year before its boom? I think it was a year.
I think it was like 3 years.
3 years. Damn.
Yeah, we need a fact checker to hang out with us on these podcasts.
We do need a fact checker.
But no, I want to say it was a while, and I want to say it was popular in
Came out in
Brazil
2018
or something.
Us.
Yeah, so it was around for a while.
And it was 2021 that it became very popular. Yeah.
2020,
ahead of its time, truly.
And it goes to show that really the most important thing is that you have a good game. And I think more and more of the industry is learning this and starting to kind of do this with their marketing tactics.
Done with the days of, and sorry, I'm going to have to single out a company out here because they just do it so well, Ubisoft. We're kind of done with the days of Ubisoft making a really nice, pretty looking cinematic trailer and then everybody's immediately on board. I mean, look at Assassin's Creed Mirage, right? They had a fantastic looking trailer, again, as they do. But then you go and look at social media and everybody's skeptic.
Yeah.
Skeptic?
But the thing is, though, Ubisoft was a dime a dozen.
Yeah. I mean, they just happened to do really well.
Yeah. Who am I thinking of? Blizzard is another great example.
Oh my God, Blizzard had fantastic
incredible
trailers.
Cinematics.
Yeah.
Incredible trailers. And I just want to say, I want to shout out the animators and graphic designers who make that stuff. Because I think there's a disconnect often between those cinematics and the game. And I think there's an assumption that they're made by the same people.
No.
And they are not.
Whole other company.
Whole other companies, whole other medium, whole other way of approaching. And they're very talented at what they do.
I mean, look at the Diablo trailer we got on Game Awards.
Yeah.
What a fantastic. Yeah.
And those guys do incredible work. Unfortunately, it's not always a reflection of how good the game developers are.
That's so true. Yeah.
And unfortunately, because those are often used as marketing points, it becomes really confusing for the gamer. So, I mean, another great example is mobile games.
Yeah.
You know, you have these killer trailers that make the game look like so much fun, and then they show gameplay and you're like, it's
another
Crush
match
reskin.
3. Yeah.
It's another match 3. It's just the same mechanic again. Woohoo, you know. So anyway, back to Forspoken and HiFi. You have, which, I mean, honestly, the trailers for Forspoken were gorgeous.
I mean, if you mute the dialogue, very, very pretty.
Very pretty. And honestly, I think even in the trailers, the dialogue really wasn't that bad. But as two people who haven't played the game, we've only watched other people play the game. So I have to mention that too. But you've played HiFi Rush.
Oh boy, have I played HiFi Rush. Yes, I have. Yes. I would like to use my time, wisely. Yeah, HiFi Rush.
Maybe I'll play Forspoken.
You should play Forspoken. You should go through that and maybe stream it to us. I really want to praise HiFi Rush for what it is, but I feel like we need to kind of segue to it first. So why are we hating so much on Forspoken by the sound of it? First of all, I would like to direct everybody to IGN and search for Forspoken and then have a look at it. But the reason is that Forspoken was this game that was marketed for a very long time, quite high profile marketing. They had a little, what do you call it? What do they call it? Something release. When they have media go play it. Press release. They had a press release.
Press release. Yeah, that press release.
Yeah, where a lot of people from press
which honestly is where they started with the bad.
They did because they were
some
worried.
press outlets didn't get it.
Yeah.
Some it didn't look good. People like it. So they just started out on the greatest
What is wrong
foot.
with the game in general is the fact that the dialogue is very not good. So the story, the narrative is quite bad, and the dialogue is, for lack of a better word, cringeworthy, and they just didn't do a good job with the characters in terms of narrative at all. The game looks pretty. The combat is flashy enough to be fun. But
I do want to break it down, and I don't want to just kind of say the opinions that everybody else has had. So let's talk about why we're backing up the things that other people are saying. So if you go and you watch people playing it, and just as a producer, narrative director, environmental artist myself, just looking at it, there are some immediate and obvious mistakes. Sound mixing was a huge one. The actual dialogue is an obvious thing. And so, you know, the environment, honestly, I think looks pretty good. I haven't played it, so I think maybe if you play more of it, you probably are going to notice discrepancies and stuff. The world does look huge. So as somebody who hasn't played it, who has noticed these things, why do we notice them and what does that mean? So, for instance, the dialogue. And Rainy, you made a great point. We were kind of talking about this before we started recording, in that it feels very Marvel-y. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
In that you have kind of a sassy character.
I have superpowers. I can do this. Yeah. Oh, wow.
You have a sassy character who happens to also be a woman of color, which I also want to talk about a little bit. And then you have this other voice alongside her, which is like the posh male white British accent. And you have the dichotomy between the two, which, let's face it, that's Iron Man. Been there, done that. Yeah. Or Ironheart. Been there, done that. You know, that's the new Iron Man character, if you will, for Marvel MCU. Is Ironheart? So, do you know what I'm talking about? Have you seen Wakanda Forever?
I have no idea who Ironheart is.
Wakanda Forever spoilers here if you haven't seen it. Wow. I'm going to spoil the hell out of it. But the new Iron Man is Ironheart, and she is a young black female who I think is from New York. No, I think she's from LA. She's from somewhere in the city. And she is in the iron suit, and she has the voice and, you know, all that stuff. And so the point I'm trying to make is, again, when you kind of listen to dialogue, you're like, been there, done that. We've seen this. Marvel's done this. There's nothing unique or special feeling when you're hearing the dialogue. And that,
unfortunately, that extends to the whole game, though.
Huh?
Unfortunately, that extends to the whole game. And it's just very generic.
And that's kind of the point, is I feel like with all art, there's a question that you have to ask yourself when you're making the art. And it's a question of, is this art or is this a means to make money? And I think you can see the answer in both of these games. Now, I don't want to discredit the people who made Forspoken, because on an individual level, I'm sure everybody genuinely cares about what they're doing.
Yep.
But when you move up the ladder to people making the decisions, the producers, we're the ones who are answering that question. We're the ones who are saying, this gets cut. We don't have time for this. We don't have the budget to focus on this. So I don't ever want to blame the writers or the environmental artists or anybody who's actually making the game. If you want to get mad about a game not being good, blame the producer. It's our fault, literally, because we're the ones who are squeezing, you know, the people at the bottom. And then above the producer, it's the publisher, the people who are giving the money and saying, nope, we're only going to give you this much. So if they're only going to give you so much, producer has to decide where to put it. And you can tell in Forspoken where the money went. Mm-hmm. It went into the mechanics.
Yeah.
Because they decided that's what was more important. And it didn't go into the writing, and it didn't go into, it went into the character design, because the character design looks amazing.
Yeah, I agree.
But
some of the clothing choices are very good. Some of the customizations are very good. And
I have to shout out too, the hair mechanics are fantastic, which is like the one thing we all combat constantly. And I feel like it's the first thing I always look at in a new game is, okay, what does the hair look like? How much effort they put into this? So it looks great, but you can see where they had to kind of cut corners, or the things that maybe were afterthoughts.
The quests, for instance, the side quests are mostly, just a recycle of the same stuff constantly. Mm-hmm. It's almost like one of those Skyrim quests when you finish the whole thing and then you have the recycling quest at the end where it just continues to happen.
But the thing is, we're guilty of doing the same thing.
Yeah. Oh, with the
there are mechanics. There are mechanics in Sunnyside that were an afterthought, that we planned on paper. We wanted to do it a certain way. We thought it was going to be a great idea. And we thought it was going to be easy enough that we pushed it and pushed it and pushed it and pushed it. And then got to the point where we had to implement it and went, oh, crap.
Yeah.
This is going to take more time, more effort, more money than we thought. And we don't have any of those things. So now what do? We can ask for more money. Not going to get it. Rarely are you going to get it. We can ask for more time. Depending on how your marketing plan works out, you might not have more time. We can, try our best.
Yeah.
And that's usually what happens. And so, and then the next thing is, okay, maybe we can push it to a DLC or something, which is a whole other conversation.
Yeah.
So
a lot of systems that got copied.
Yeah, it's not as simple as, oh, they just did a crappy job. Well, okay, but why?
Yeah.
And whose fault is it? And how upset are we going to be about it?
I would like an insider report of what actually happened in Forspoken's development. Because if you think about it, here's the thing. Forspoken, because of the fact that it had a marketing plan, had a release date. And the game had to be done by that date.
Yes.
HiFi Rush was just a stealth drop. So technically, they could have taken as much time as they wanted to. We don't know how. Actually, I don't know if it's public information yet, but I don't know how much time they took to develop HiFi Rush versus Forspoken.
I haven't looked into that. So, but I think that's an interesting point in that how does marketing impact game design? Mm-hmm. And is that something that as game developers we need to reevaluate? But it's also the only way to find out whether or not a game is going to be worth the money.
Yeah.
Because the worst thing you can do is spend $500,000 making a game, release it, and it flops, and you're not getting your money back.
Well, the industry term is product viability, right? And if you don't have the game out at some wishlist capacity, and you are not getting some sort of metric, then you're not going to do well. I mean, Sunnyside is, and this is public info, you can go look it up on SteamDB. We're sitting at, 54,000 wish lists?
Something like that,
and that number is the reason that when we talk with publishers and marketing stuff,
sets our budget.
They set our budget and they're happy to continue because they know they can project an amount of sales for the game because they know how much interest it is. But if you don't have a game like out in public and you're just working on it in secrecy, you have none of this metric, and it's so much more difficult. Huge risk. It's so much more difficult for a indie game to want to do this. So that's why I think HiFi Rush was a pure passion project. Because I feel like they just put money into it and they said, even if it's going to fail, it is going to be something we're going to do.
It's a passion project from people who had the money to potentially lose.
And also, that's it's from hugely people who have already proven themselves. It's from the guy who made The Evil Within and Resident Evil and stuff.
So if we look at that on an indie scale, okay, let's look at, what was it? Kira and the Bridge of Secrets, I think.
I think so. I'll look it up.
Kina and the Bridge of Secrets. Also an indie game with funding, actually. Bridge of Spirits, good funding. Indie game, small team. No proof of yes, we've put out games before. This is going to be fantastic. Passion project, incredible game from the reviews and everything. Biggest complaint, wasn't long enough. Okay.
Yeah.
Sure. Fine. But how was it marketed? How was it funded? How did they decide how much money they were going to spend on it? How did they get, was it EA who backed them?
I think, wait, let's have a look.
I think it was EA who backed them. Or was that Stray?
Maximum Games. No, it wasn't EA.
Oh, it was Maximum. Okay, it was Maximum Games.
Yeah. But the thing with Kina was, and I think the thing that kind of shot him in the foot with a lot of those feedbacks that said the game wasn't long enough, is that everybody looked at the visuals of the game and assumed it was a AAA game.
Exactly.
While in reality, it was just an indie game. So nobody kind of gave him the treatment of an indie game. They gave him the treatment of a AAA game, which I feel very bad for the initial, 100%. At least, response that they got. Because if you look at it now, it has kind of balanced itself out because people figured out it was an indie game and they started kind of adjusting their views to the context of it. But but at the start it started being viewed as a AAA game, and that did hurt him a little bit.
And so it just kind of it shows that gamers have expectations that have to be met, and we don't have any way to predict. It's the same thing that happens with movies. They'll spend millions of dollars on a movie and it flops. Okay, cool. Universal lost a couple $1 million. Who cares? But when it's people like us who put our life savings into something, all of our time, all of our effort, all of everything that we have to get a game made, we have to be able to kind of look ahead and go, okay, I think this is going to be worth it. It's again, back to, is the time and effort worth what you're going to get at the end? And without marketing the game a little bit, you have no way to know what's going to happen. And so, you hear a lot. So kind of the question becomes, well, then maybe, indie games should just do stealth drops. We can't.
Yeah.
Because if we stealth drop a game, who's going to care?
That's exactly the point. And there's another interesting insider point of view for you guys is the fact that when you go to publishers and you're trying to get a publishing deal, if you do have a Steam page up, they will ask for your wishlist numbers. Yep. And they are going to heavily judge you by your wishlist numbers.
And if you don't have a Steam page up, they might not talk to you.
Yeah.
Honestly. Because they have nothing to go off of.
Very small instances, but that's not the case. If you have a fantastically new, unique idea and you have also made it somehow with some money from somewhere, but those are very, very dime a dozen.
Well, so let's look at the dime a dozen, which is Concerned Ape and Stardew Valley.
Yep.
Great example. But
the thing is time, which doesn't get talked about nearly enough. Yeah. And
it took 6 years to make Stardew Valley?
I believe so. I don't actually, again, we need the fact checker to be in these episodes.
I think it was 7 years, something like that. There's actually a really incredible YouTuber. I think I'm going to say, let's link him or something for this. I'm going to have to look up his name too, but he does deep dives on video game production. And he pulls interviews and he pulls information and shows the whole development process and all the decisions that were made and how things happen. And he did one on Stardew Valley. And it's, I think it's easy to be like, oh, well, that one guy made a game and he, made millions of dollars. Anybody can do it. No, it doesn't work that way.
I mean, it is definitely inspiring. But
it's very
there's a
inspiring.
lot more to it. Yeah.
But he chose as of that point, mostly ignored genre that people were dying for content in. He had the means and a very supportive partner to not work and be supported and put in all of his time and effort into learning game development and making a game. Not everybody's that lucky, unfortunately. If he'd had to have a full-time job, it probably would have taken 12 years to make Stardew Valley. So that's something to consider. I think also, we need a fact checker. Either did an Indiegogo or some kind of thing where he was creating community before he released the game.
Yeah, there was a community for Kickstarter because I know one of our team members was part of it and followed up the development process. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know if it was necessarily crowdfunding, but it was some sort of...
Yeah, I don't remember. Community. It was something, but built up hype, essentially, for the game before releasing it. So he did a long-term kind of grassroots marketing campaign. But the reason that Stardew Valley did so well was because it was a dang good game and people liked it and told all their friends to play it, who bought it for other friends, and people started streaming it. And that's what made Stardew Valley as popular as it is. People forget that game came out in 2016, which, okay, now it's kind of a long time ago, but my brain's still stuck in 2020. So that was only 4 years ago. So, but we think of it now as it's a classic. People put the words Harvest Moon next to Stardew Valley, even though Stardew Valley was based on Harvest Moon, which came out 20 years earlier. So, it's a special concept. Let's look at Among Us. Really unique take on creating a game. Correct me if I'm wrong, kind of the first of its kind.
I would say so.
Or
in
one
the
of the first.
Multiplayer competitive, I guess you can call it multiplayer competitive games. This was although, I mean, if you want to, you could probably compare it to stuff like either just Werewolf, like the old game, or you could even compare it to something like the some of the Gmod games that you can play, like
but kind of an untouched genre, we can say.
It's a Trouble in Terrorist
really
Town,
cute art, very small team, kind of and again, didn't actually really do that well. But
and it was actually from a known studio, by the way. So the Inner Sloth had another game series that was very popular. Actually, they started out as one of those. The creator started out as one of those small Flash games. So remember those Flash games where you could decide what you want to do, and then it continues. I forgot what it was called. Their game. Let me pull it out.
Because you said like established. I wouldn't say like super established. Like still new studio, relatively.
Henry Stickmin was their game, and then that was that got quite a lot of attention, and again in the indie sphere for sure. But then Among Us came out, and nobody even talked about it. At least from where I was sitting, I don't remember hearing about Among Us at all until 2021.
Yeah, when people started playing it, and again another great example, Valheim. Low graphics, not a really light game, multiplayer. I don't want to say first of its genre, because definitely not. It's a survival game. And there's definitely been other survival games. But with a really unique progression system, really unique fun build system, and went viral. And so the thing that they all really have in common is uniqueness and, they're good games that people enjoy playing. But if you compare that to something like Forspoken, if you don't have anything that sets your game apart, or the only thing that sets your game apart is pandering, which I'm going to say it, having a young black female protagonist without really thinking about what that means and the impact of that and how it's going to affect the way your game is marketed or viewed or any of that. And just doing it as like, oh, might as well just make our character a woman because that's what everybody's doing now. It's kind of like, it's almost the mentality. And I don't remember where I heard this, but I heard something about people talking about MMOs. Oh, it was probably Josh Dreyfus. I'm sure it was him talking about it. The MMO sphere, which I'm not huge in MMOs, but I've heard Josh talk a lot about it. So now I feel like an expert. If you don't follow Josh Dreyfus, go follow him. He's awesome. And, you kind of, and he did actually a whole video on this. I feel like we should link this because he made a really great point in that World of Warcraft kind of figured it out. They figured out the magic of making an MMO and making a successful one that was successful enough that people who weren't gamers knew what it was. And I feel like that's the best way to kind of like figure out if you've like made it in video games. It's like Minecraft. If people who don't play video games know what it is. Minecraft, Among Us, World of Warcraft. And World of Warcraft kind of
Mario Bros.
Super Mario, yeah. Mario. World of Warcraft kind of solved the puzzle of what makes for a successful MMO. And then every MMO that came out after that was just copying the formula. And maybe tweaking something here or there, but nobody tried to reinvent the formula. So you look at games that have been successful recently, Valheim, Among Us, Stardew Valley, the ones we're talking about, reinvented the formula. And that's what pushed them over enough to make them successful.
And I think, just the phrase reinventing the formula is really kind of intimidating to a lot of indie devs that are trying to approach this. From my experience, it is taking a familiar genre and then seeing why certain things are done a certain way. And then looking at how you can do it completely differently. So if you go back to Hi-Fi Rush for a sec, at core, it's just a hack and slash game. Made by people who know how to make hack and slash games. But what sets it apart is that everything is synced up to the beat of the music. Yeah. And on paper, it sounds like such a simple thing. If you tell that to somebody, they might even say, oh, that's not enough of a unique mechanic, but they went so far in with it. Every single prop in the environment is moving to the sync beat of the music. I have no idea how they did it. But if you change the formula and you commit to it, then that's going to work.
And I want to say something a little bit about Hi-Fi Rush in comparison to the other one, Metal Hellsinger.
Right, yes.
Is that what it's called? Which was honestly first. I want to give them a shout out. They did it first. The reason I think they were not as successful as something like Hi-Fi Rush was really the music choice.
Do you think it wasn't as readily accessible?
It's not as approachable.
Yeah,
it's not as approachable. I watched my partner play it. He's a huge metal fan. He loves metal music. And the singers on that game did an incredible job. I don't like metal music. If you put Hi-Fi Rush and Metal Hellsinger in front of me, I'm gonna probably try both of them, but I'm gonna gravitate towards Hi-Fi Rush because the music is pop music. Really?
Yeah. I mean,
it's
they have
more
rock in there,
approachable.
but that's just rock. No,
it's just more approachable. And so you kind of have to now. For Metal Hellsinger, that was a passion project. They all love metal music, and I'm sure they're all happy with it. But if you're looking at just money,
they were a bit upset that they didn't win
Rush.
the Game Award for Music of the Year,
and they should have. Honestly,
they really should have. The thing is, okay, God of War won, but also they had really good music. I kind of love both. I really appreciate Metal Hellsinger for what it is.
Yeah, same.
But I also really love God of War soundtrack, so I couldn't choose between the two.
But again,
if we're talking about uniqueness, definitely Metal Hellsinger should have won.
Metal Hellsinger. But again, you also have to look at who had the better budget.
Oh well, yes, true. They did an incredible job with the budget they had, I would say. Yeah. But if we want to talk about Hi-Fi Rush for a sec, and what makes it an incredible game. So this whole idea of everything moving to the beat of the music,
it's genius.
It's genius, but no other game has done it to the level they did. Like every single thing in the environment moves to the beat of the song. If there's a conveyor belt, it moves to the beat of the song. If there is an alarm bell going on, the movement of the light and the blinking of the light is with the rhythm.
So hard to implement.
Yeah, and
Can we just talk about that for a second? Like
it's incredible.
Taking a cool game, stepping out of the gamer perspective. Okay, let's step into the game developer perspective.
Yeah.
How the hell did they do that?
Everything that you put in the environment that is animated, especially, you have to think about. Like, how do we sync it up to the music? And I'm sure they had some programming in there that could just sync whatever to the music.
They had to have. It had to have been a custom code that links up to the music somehow. And
but you know what's another difficult thing to it that you have to consider is that you can't just give it raw music. Their music probably had information as to where the beats are to then run that animation. So the most incredible thing about it is that in Hi-Fi Rush, that's your indicator for where to press the buttons. You just look at the environment. You do get like a little helper thing at the bottom of the screen if you want extra help. But without that, that's not on by default. You just look at the environment, and then just without realizing it, it keeps you with rhythm. Because every single thing you're looking at is moving with the rhythm. And you know what's the coolest thing? The character's walk cycle is synced to the rhythm. The character runs to the rhythm.
Yeah, it's really cool. And the thing is, again, okay, so we're comparing two games, Forspoken and Hi-Fi Rush. Honestly, two completely different games.
Yeah.
That just came out at the same time from two huge studios with massive budgets. One of them is a fantasy isekai with a story that's been told. Honestly, let's be honest, this story's been told before. With maybe some unique character design and some really cool gameplay. Not really unique gameplay, but cool ideas. Next to a stealth dropped, unique, new genre. Because that music beat play style is developing into a new genre. There are a whole lot of games coming out very similar where they're using music as a means to either influence the gameplay or the story or both. Yeah. A lot of indie games have been doing it. There are some really cool ones that I want to check out. There were a lot that have been showcased recently. Unfortunately, well, maybe fortunately, AAA got there first. And hopefully now people go, oh, I like this, and check out those indie games. That's kind of what we have to hope for. But there's that cool one that's been going around on Twitter that's like classical music. And you're like actually fighting with the music. It's really cool looking.
I haven't seen that one.
Yeah, it looks neat. And so yeah, you have kind of, I don't want to say old and tired, but kind of a genre that's been heavily, utilized with Forspoken for a very long time now, next to something that's new and fresh and interesting and kind of exciting.
Yeah. And I want to praise one more thing for HiFi. It's not just about the music being synced up or anything. They actually have really interesting characters too. The character development, the character design in that game is fantastic. The dialogue's really good. It's really fresh. And you actually like the characters. You really start liking them. And especially 808. I freaking love 808. It's the cat.
What's 808? Oh, that's of course
it's the cat. Yeah, it's the cat. And by the way, for anybody who doesn't know, 808 is like a drum kit. And every sound that the cat makes is from that drum kit when it jumps around, when it moves around. Every sound that it makes is an 808 drum kit sound. Of course it is. And you know what's another thing? They kind of won me over when I realized the voice actor for the main character for Hi-Fi Rush is the same voice actor for what was his name? Akechi from Persona. And the girl in there, I forgot her name, Peppermint. Peppermint is Futaba. So.
Oh, well, there you go.
I was like, I know, those characters sound familiar. Lauren was the one that actually figured out first. I was like, that sounds really like Akechi.
I think that's another thing that very often goes unnoticed or overlooked is the voice acting.
Oh, yeah.
I feel like there's like one voice actor in video games that you say their name and people are like, oh, yeah, I know who that is. It's Jennifer Hale. But she's kind of the only one, really.
Yeah. Troy Baker, maybe.
Maybe Troy Baker, yeah. But it's definitely, and I think, Jennifer Hale's been doing it for so long. Troy Baker's done other stuff. And so, but often the voice actors definitely don't get the credit that they're due. And so that's something I actually want to do like a whole podcast on.
Oh, God.
Is talking about.
How fantastic it would be if we could ever have voice actor guests.
Oh, I think we could do it. Yeah, I think we can make that happen. Because it's something that, is so important to games. It's not necessary for a good game. Does it definitely make a good game a better game? 100%.
I do the same thing that people do with actors and actresses, but with voice actors. I know more voice actor names and voice actresses rather than actors.
Yeah.
Because I watch
100%.
more content that is voice acted rather than acted.
Yeah. Anime.
So, yeah.
A lot of anime.
Anime, video games, all that stuff.
But yeah, I think, if we're looking at these two games, I do think they're kind of a really great snapshot of like where the industry has been and where it's heading.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
And how indie developers like us kind of move into like play into that. There are the one thing I think a lot of people don't realize, unless you're like an avid indie gamer, for every AAA game that you love, there are 300 indie games just like it that are probably better, that have had more time, have had more consideration, have had more passion put into them. So if for some reason you are a AAA only gamer and you've stumbled upon our podcast, check out the indie games. Do it. Don't complain that the next God of War hasn't come out yet, or that the next Assassin's Creed or Call of Duty or whatever hasn't come out yet.
Could jump into. Yeah.
Play something else. Go try it. Go spend $5 and play an awesome game.
And you're right with this change of kind of direction in the industry. I feel like it's more of a change in the actual just gamers themselves, with how they look at games and how they judge games and play games. Because if you look at it, Forspoken was one. Another game that did disappointingly bad was Saints Row. For all the exact reasons, actually, funny enough, as Forspoken. But then you look at what people were playing instead. They were playing Stray. They were playing Cult of the Lamb. They were playing all these indie games, Neon White. They were playing all these indie games instead.
We can even talk about the fact that...
Because they had the option, they would compare them.
Yeah, the fact that It Takes Two took Game of the Year.
Oh, yeah.
Which technically is still an indie game. More funding than a non-indie game, because I think maybe they were connected to EA. I don't know. Somebody was backed by EA. Yeah, they were the ones who were... So funding from EA, cool. More money, awesome, which means more time, which means a better staff, which means more consideration for, the ability to make things. But still an indie game. Small team, passion project.
Plague Tale is also an indie game and it's been doing fantastically well.
Yeah, so I do think that we're definitely in like that renaissance of indie games. And that is actually kind of a segue into another topic, which I think we're going to have to save for the next podcast, which is live service games.
Oh, and
they're not quite doing as well as they used to be.
They're not. I would say, without getting into any why, but I feel like indie games are again kind of the problem here for them, because 100%. Now a lot of AAA games had to be careful, because people are playing indies instead of them, and
100%.
It's threatening.
And because there's also the feeling like a job and. Feeling, the want to play a game versus the feeling like you need to play a game. And there's a whole bunch of stuff that we can talk about, which I think we will do next time. Play a game? No, play a game. When you look at live service games, it's like you're checking in for that daily thing that you have to do versus like, I just want to go play a game for 10 minutes and have fun. One feels like a job. One feels like recreation. So there's definitely a lot of stuff we could talk about live service games, how they came about, the first ones that made it big, why we think they're kind of going the wayside now, which honestly, I'm so glad for. But we're gonna save that for next time because
thank you.
We're getting a little long here, but
thank you everybody for joining us for this very first episode of the Developers Zen podcast. If you're watching us on YouTube, all the links to our socials and stuff will be on the screen and in the description. And if you are listening to us on any other streaming service, you can
go look at our
the
YouTube.
Next episode here, or you can go onto YouTube and search for RainyGames, and then that will be the place that we upload all of these stuff. We also have a Discord server. They should join.
Oh, yeah.
And it's a lot of fun. And, we mostly talk about Sunnyside because that's the game we're working on now. But we'll be talking about a lot more stuff once Sunnyside's out.
And I should mention that all of this is connected to our Patreon. So Patreon backers are getting access to this stuff first.
If you're a Patreon backer, hi.
We love them. Hi, Patreon backers. Thank you for supporting us. So if you're not a Patreon backer and you want access early or to extended things or to whatever, get on that. And go back our Patreon. Yeah, you'll be able to help us keep making games.
You'll be able to catch our podcast X days earlier than normal because we haven't decided for how many days yet. And you will also be able to get extended cuts of our podcast. And hopefully, if we have guests, that'll be extra interesting and exciting for you guys to want to.
I'm excited for that. I'm excited to start pulling people in. I've already secured a couple people. I'm gonna say who have already agreed to come on and guest. So. Some music people, some development people, some legal people, some other people.
So
we're definitely going to have a lot more to talk about, a lot more to share with you guys. We won't spend an hour talking about our history in every episode, so we'll have more time to talk about the good stuff. But yeah, check out our socials, check out our Discord, check out the Patreon, check out the YouTube, and thanks for hanging out with us.
Thanks for listening to us. We'll catch you all in the next episode. Bye.
Bye.